I knew from the beginning that I shouldn't feel this way. She was my best friend, my safe place, the one person who could pull me out of my worst days with just a stupid joke or a soft smile. She was the girl I trusted with my secrets, my fears, my ugly, unfiltered thoughts. And yet, there was one thing I could never tell her. One thing I had buried so deep inside me that I pretended it wasn't there at all. I wanted her. Not in the way she wanted other people. Not in the fleeting, casual way she flirted with guys at parties, laughing into her wine glass as if none of it really mattered. I wanted her in a way that scared me. Because she was straight. Or at least, that's what she said. I never questioned my own identity. I had always known who I was, had never hidden it, never hesitated to be honest with the people in my life. And it had never been a problem. Not with her. From the moment we met, she had accepted me without hesitation. She had never made me feel different, never treated me like I was some kind of anomaly. It should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because she was different. She was the kind of different that made my stomach clench whenever she hugged me a second too long. The kind that made my skin burn when she rested her head in my lap, completely unaware of what it did to me. The kind that made it impossible to ignore the way she looked at me sometimes, like I was the only person in the world who truly understood her. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into the way she traced circles on my arm absent-mindedly while we talked about nothing. That the way she leaned into me at parties, instead of the guys vying for her attention, meant absolutely nothing. It had to mean nothing, because otherwise I would lose everything. So I swallowed it down. Every fleeting thought, every stolen glance, every ache in my chest when she spoke about the guys she was dating. I never crossed a line. Never let my hands linger. Never let my voice waver. I was just her best friend. And that was all I would ever be. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Until the night everything changed. I don't even remember what we were talking about when it happened. She had come over late, like she always did when she didn't feel like going out. Our other friends had gone to some club downtown, but we had both made our excuses, opting instead for a night of wine and bad TV in my tiny apartment. It was normal. Routine. She was curled up on my couch, her legs draped over mine, half listening to whatever nonsense was playing on the screen. And I was trying so hard to keep it together. Because lately it had been getting worse. The way I felt around her. The way my pulse spiked every time she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through my hair. The way my body reacted to the warmth of her skin against mine, even though we had always been this close. It was suffocating. I needed space. I needed to get out of my own head. But then she spoke, and my entire world tilted on its axis. Have you ever fallen for someone you couldn't have? The question hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. I froze. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, felt my stomach drop like I had just missed a step on a staircase. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the wine glass in her hands, tracing the rim with her thumb, her expression unreadable. I forced a laugh, pretending like my heart wasn't about to explode out of my chest. Is this a trick question? I joked, my voice coming out slightly strained. Isn't that like half of the human experience? She let out a soft huff of laughter, shaking her head. Yeah, I guess. But she still wasn't looking at me. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. Because this wasn't normal. This wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to ask things like this. She wasn't the type to get quiet, to get in her own head, to hesitate before speaking. Something was different. She was different. And I didn't know what to do with that. I opened my mouth, ready to change the subject, to steer us back into safe, familiar territory. But before I could, she looked up. And I knew. The way her gaze locked onto mine, uncertain, searching, nervous, it was enough to send every single thought spiraling out of my head. I felt like I had been knocked sideways. Like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous and irreversible. And the worst part, I wanted to fall. She must have sensed my panic because just as quickly, she let out a breath and forced a smile, shaking her head as if brushing the moment aside. Never mind, she said lightly, shifting to sit up. It's stupid. I should probably head home anyway. Then, before I could even process what was happening, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. A casual gesture, one she had done 1,000 times before. But this time, my body locked up. Because this time I felt it. The hesitation. The way she lingered. The way her breath was just a little too shaky when she pulled away. She stood, grabbing her jacket, and I just sat there. Frozen. Confused. And for the first time since meeting her, I had no idea what was going to happen next. It was supposed to be just another night. A quiet evening, just the two of us. No crowded bars, no deafening music, no unwanted small talk with people we barely knew. Our friends had decided to go clubbing, but we both made our excuses. We always did. Instead, we ended up at my apartment, curled up on my couch with a half-empty bottle of wine between us. The TV played some random movie in the background, one neither of us was really paying attention to. This was normal. This was our thing. But something felt different. I couldn't name it, but I could feel it. Maybe it was the way she was looking at me, not quite meeting my eyes, like she was caught in some internal debate she wasn't ready to share. Or maybe it was the way the usual rhythm of our conversations kept faltering, like we were both too aware of the silence stretching between us. It was unsettling. I found myself overanalyzing every little thing, her tone, her posture, the way she kept fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Had I been too obvious? Had she figured it out? Was she about to tell me she knew, and that things could never be the same again? I was spiraling, drowning in my own paranoia, when she suddenly spoke. Have you ever fallen for someone you couldn't have? My heart stopped. The question hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stared at her, completely unprepared, my brain scrambling for something, anything to say. She wasn't looking at me. She was swirling the last bit of wine in her glass, her expression unreadable, her teeth sinking lightly into her bottom lip. I forced out a laugh. A terrible, unnatural laugh. "Oh, sure," I said, aiming for casual and missing entirely. "Isn't that like the foundation of every sad love song ever written?" She let out a soft, almost amused exhale, but didn't say anything right away. Instead, she finally lifted her eyes to mine. And I knew. I fucking knew. Because her gaze wasn't just thoughtful. It wasn't just introspective. It was terrified. Terrified in the way someone looks when they're standing on the edge of something they can't take back. And that's when I felt it. The shift. The thing that had been creeping up on me all night, lurking in the spaces between our words, in the way her fingers had brushed against mine earlier when she reached for the bottle. She wasn't just asking a question. She was asking me. The realization knocked the breath from my lungs. My pulse pounded, loud in my ears, and suddenly I was too aware of everything. The warmth of the room, the weight of her gaze, the fact that she still hadn't looked away. I should have said something. Anything. But I was frozen. And in that silence, that unbearable silence, I saw it. The second she panicked. The moment she regretted asking. She dropped her gaze, biting down harder on her lip, shaking her head like she was trying to brush the whole thing off. "Never mind," she murmured, forcing out a small, self-deprecating laugh. That was a dumb question. And before I could stop her, before I could do anything, she was already moving, already pushing herself up off the couch, reaching for her jacket. My chest tightened. She was leaving. She was running. Because she had felt it too. Wait. The word barely made it past my lips before she leaned down, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek like she always did. Like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Because this time, her breath was unsteady. This time, her lips lingered just a fraction of a second too long. This time, when she pulled away, she didn't meet my eyes. Then, just like that, she was gone. And I was left sitting there, staring at the space she had just occupied, my entire world tilting under the weight of what had just happened. Because something had changed. And I had no idea what it meant. The days that followed were a quiet, unspoken game. Nothing was the same. Our conversations lost their depth, reduced to surface-level chatter that felt forced and unnatural. The comfortable silences we used to share now felt heavy, suffocating, like both of us were waiting for the other to acknowledge what had happened. We never did. Instead, we danced around it. Our eyes lingered too long before darting away. Touches that used to be casual, her knee brushing against mine, her fingers grazing my wrist as she reached for something, felt charged. Almost unbearable. And yet, neither of us addressed it. Neither of us dared to say the words that would set this thing, whatever it was, on fire. I was convinced I had ruined everything. I replayed that night over and over in my mind, searching for clues. Had I reacted wrong? Had I been too obvious? Had she left my apartment regretting whatever had passed between us? I couldn't tell, and the not knowing was killing me. Until the night she changed everything. It started like any other night out. A friend's birthday. A bar filled with too many people, too much noise, too many drinks being passed around. We were both tipsy, but she She was a little more than tipsy. I could tell by the way she laughed too easily, by the way she swayed slightly when she stood, by the way she pulled me onto the dance floor without a second thought. There was nothing unusual about that. We had danced together before, many times. Carefree, ridiculous, spinning each other around just for the hell of it. It was always easy, always safe. Until it wasn't. Because this time, as the music pulsed around us, she moved closer. Too close. Her hands found my waist, lingering, her fingers pressing just slightly into the fabric of my dress. I swallowed hard, my body stiffening on instinct. But she didn't back away. She just swayed with me, slow and deliberate, like she knew. Like she wanted me to know. The heat between us was undeniable, spreading through me like wildfire. And then, she leaned in, her lips just inches from my ear, and whispered, "If I kissed you right now, would you hate me for it?" I forgot how to breathe. My body locked up, every nerve ending firing at once. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a drunken slip of the tongue. It wasn't a mistake she would pretend never happened. It was a test. A challenge. She wanted to know if I would let her. And God help me, I wanted to let her. I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes, and the look she gave me. It was hesitation. It was fear. But beneath all of that, it was need. Raw and unfiltered, like she was fighting against something she didn't understand. Like she was just waiting for me to pull her in. I could have said no. I should have said no. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not when she was looking at me like that. Not when she was already closing the space between us, her lips brushing against mine in the faintest, most uncertain touch. And the second I responded, the second I leaned in, pressing back, that hesitation was gone. Her arms wrapped around my neck, pulling me in like she never wanted to let go. Her lips parted against mine, and suddenly, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a claim. Deep. Intense. Desperate. Her hands tangled in my hair, gripping, keeping me impossibly close as she kissed me like she had been waiting for this. Like she had wanted this. Like she had always wanted this. The world around us faded. The people. The music. The fact that we were standing in the middle of a crowded dance floor where anyone could see us. None of it mattered. Because she was kissing me. And I was kissing her back. And neither of us wanted to stop. She had once believed she was straight. But now, I wasn't sure either of us believed that anymore. Part 4. What could never be undone. The kiss should have been a mistake. Something we'd laugh about in the morning, brush off as a drunken lapse in judgment. But it wasn't. Because when we finally pulled apart, breathless and shaken, she didn't let go. Her arms were still wrapped around my neck, her fingers still tangled in my hair, as if she was afraid that if she moved, the moment would shatter. Her forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. And for the first time in my life, I saw her differently. Or maybe, for the first time, she was letting me see her. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, her entire body trembling against mine. I should have said something. I should have been the rational one. But the only thing my mind could focus on was the way her skin felt under my fingertips, the way her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, the way my own body refused to move because I needed to stay in this moment just a little longer. Then finally she spoke. "I don't know what this means." Her voice was quiet, shaky, like she was terrified of saying the words out loud. But what shook me more, what sent my pulse into a frenzied rhythm, was what she said next. "But I know I don't want to stop." My breath caught. I didn't expect that. I had prepared myself for regret, for awkwardness, for her to laugh nervously and say that was a mistake before walking away, leaving me standing there with my heart in my hands. But she didn't. She was still there, holding on to me like she needed something to ground her. Like I was the only thing keeping her steady in a storm she hadn't expected. And I realized, she wasn't just afraid of what had happened. She was afraid of how much she had liked it. I swallowed hard, my hands sliding down her back, unsure of where to hold her, whether to let go or pull her closer. I wanted to tell her that it was okay, that she didn't have to figure it all out tonight. But I didn't trust my own voice. So instead, I did what I had wanted to do from the very beginning. I leaned in and kissed her again. Soft this time. Slow. Testing. And when she kissed me back, when she let out a quiet, desperate sigh against my lips, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was something that had been waiting to happen for a long, long time. And now there was no turning back. From then on, I wanted that woman inside me.